heard Darius Slay, and I heard that. By the way, for the record, Darius Slay had no say in Matt Patricia being hired by the front office as a consultant to the Eagles. Players don't have any say. The head coach in Philly has no say. Why would Darius Slay? They probably told him about it, but they didn't give a shit about it. Because if they did, they wouldn't have hired him. You don't bring problems into your locker room unless you think there's an asset. Why would you create bullshit in a locker room that doesn't have any bullshit? It's like starting a fire in the middle of your locker room when you don't need to. Why would you do that? And then you're going to ask the player if it's okay, I could start a fire in your locker room? Why would you do that? You wouldn't. So my question is, Slay and Patricia said that, yeah, we're cordial. Could this be a problem this year in the Eagle locker room? Especially when you're playing against somebody. By the way, Slay and Bradbury and that entire frame of how they play defense against top-flight quarterbacks has been a failure. Every big-time quarterback that they played outside of Aaron Rodgers has beaten them. And with high completion percentages. Go back the last 2 years. Owned the team. Owned them. Owned the secondary. Owned them. From Derek Carr to Brady to Garoppolo to Herbert to Mahomes to Dak. Shit, Daniel Jones has beaten that team in the last 2 years. Shit, Tyler Heineke's beaten them. Okay? Could this be a problem in the locker room when you face a little adversity? You see, the Eagles haven't faced any adversity really in over a year, except for the shit that went on in the Super Bowl. And you didn't have another week to have to talk about it. Some players made comments about it. One guy in Carolina and another guy in Detroit made comments that he didn't think the coaching staff on both sides of the ball did a good job. One guy in Carolina saying I wasn't utilized, and the other guy in Detroit is saying, well, they really didn't put us in a position to succeed. Parting shots and two guys that got raises. These guys weren't fired. They got raises. You can say they got fired. You don't get a raise. Consider that being fired. Why would the Eagles bring in Matt Patricia? Matt Patricia, is he more important than Darius Slay? I say so. I think Matt Patricia's knowledge of how to help Sean Desai was more valuable than Darius Slay. Why would you bring him in if you thought it was a troublemaking guy and thought it was going to be a troublesome situation? Why? Because Slay doesn't talk shit on people? Slay hasn't crucified Matt Patricia in the past? Slay's made it very clear he doesn't like him? That had no bearing on him being hired. That had no bearing. The Eagles thought more of what he could bring to the organization. Like I told you, what Howie does. Howie doesn't give a shit about Darius Slay. He doesn't fall in love with his players. He falls in like with them. He doesn't get into that emotional scenario. Like, look at Bob Myers for the Golden State Warriors. You want to know why I think Bob Myers stepped away from the Warriors? I think he doesn't want to have a come-to-Jesus conversation with Klay Thompson or with Draymond Green that we got to break this thing up if we're going to succeed. And we got to continue to evolve because they have to evolve if they're going to maintain their position in the West. And I think Bob Myers didn't want to be the bad guy. I don't think Bob wanted to be the bad guy. So he resigned. Question, Sills. What flaw in the defense did Howie Roseman see from last year that led him to want Patricia's services? What wrinkle does Patricia bring? Easy. They became predictable. Their alignments were so predictable, and their weaknesses were so predictable. You got to do some more disguising here because you got less. You got less experience. I don't want to use the word talent because I don't know that yet. You got less experience on your defense than you did a year ago. They were too predictable. Your linebackers last year were terrible in coverage. Your linebackers couldn't cover anything out of the backfield. It was atrocious. And the middle of your zone was absolutely readable. That's why all the quarterbacks were between 78 and 80% in completion percentage, the ones that knew what they were doing. And this year, you're playing way better players. And in my opinion, you're also playing against the AFC East teams. And Matt Patricia, in my opinion, having game planned against some of the best quarterbacks in the history of the sport, the Drew Breeses of the world, the Peyton Mannings of the world. Remember, he was there 17 years with Brian Flores. And those guys and those three guys did a great job with defenses at times wasn't up to being a top 10 defense in New England. But they made it work. Why? They disguised a lot of shit. And for the record, they're more of a press coverage defense in New England. They actually have corners in New England. The Eagles have center fielders. And great point, JM. And Belichick beats Mahomes. Hey, isn't that funny? Now I realize it because of JM's take right there. Brilliant, JM. Sirianni and the coaching staff that you have right now can't beat Andy Reid. But Patricia was part of a staff that did beat him. And you want as many coaches that have beaten Andy Reid and Mahomes on your coaching staff as you could possibly get. It's a great take. That's right. They know how to beat Mahomes. You got to beat him. There's really very few teams in the NFL that are going to stop the Eagles this year. And probably when you get to the NFC title game, maybe your divisional game will be tough. I don't know. It wasn't this past year. Maybe your NFC game was not a challenge because you guys did your job and knocked the quarterback out. Your game will be the Super Bowl again. So you got to beat that guy. And right now, you can't beat him. You don't have enough talent to beat him. You're not beating him. That Eagle team's not beating him. You're not. Well, you know what? Here, maybe the third time. Maybe the third time they do. Okay, law averages. You got to. And for the record, the first time was a train wreck. They ran the ball on you for 200 yards at Lincoln Financial. Something Andy Reid with no running backs. They ran the ball on you for 200 yards. He didn't need to do anything spectacular in that first game. Then he took you apart systematically in the second half. It was the best coaching job coming out of the halftime I've ever seen Andy Reid have. It was tremendous. And Patricia was brought in for that. Hey, 5-star, you're damn right, whatever. You got killed in the second half. 17 up, they erased it, beat you. Good night, go home. Second place trophy, congratulations. Silver medal doesn't look good around your neck, especially when you had the better team. You're right, whatever. You're damn right. Sills is Slayer, Bradbury, elite. No. Both of them together are. It's a great duo. It's a great duo. Okay? I think Slay fell apart a little bit in the last 6 games of the season. I didn't really think he played that great in the Super Bowl. And he never was challenged in the playoffs, in the NFC playoffs, because they took shitbag quarterbacks on. Sills acting like the Eagles got blown out. Second half you did. You had a 17-point lead in the Super Bowl. Has to be one of the biggest margins in the history of the game, and you let it up. Okay? And for the record, well, the defense let us down. Well, you have to get 3 and outs too. The defense did a great job, and you stopped running the ball. You stopped running the ball in the second half. Something that you do. Your coaching sucked. Okay? Your coaching sucked in the second half. You're making it sound like that team didn't take you apart in the second half. You were up 17. Oh, 28. That's right. The Falcons had a bigger margin. You were up 17, and they Come on, man. What are you talking about? They took you apart in the second half. You had defensive backs running into one another because you were trying to pass off crossing routes. With guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, they were confusing you. Juju Smith-Schuster confused you. Well, wait till Stephon Diggs gets on the field. That's going to be interesting, man. Who's covering Travis Kelce on the Eagles? Just curious. Who's covering him at Arrowhead this year? Who's covering him? Who? The kid from Chicago? The rookie? A rookie versus Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce probably licking his chops on that one. You're playing the AFC. It's the big boy table. Okay? So Matt Patricia is an important hire this year. I'll tell you this, think about it. He's the most experienced coach that the Eagles have hired in the last 2 years. Is that fair? He's the most experienced coach you've hired in 2 years. Shit, let me think. 3 years. Sirianni wasn't experienced like Matt Patricia. Who else? Tracy Rocker, he's more experienced. Jeff Stoutland was already here. Let me think. On defense, no. He's the most experienced coach that you have hired in the last 3 years. 5 years? Could be, Devin. So when you have a guy like, and by the way, for the record, I don't give a shit about, no, I shouldn't say that, because I want him to be good with the players, because it's not his unit. And how I want his influence, this is what I would do. I would want him, if I am Sean Desai, in every single defensive meeting that I have. And I would want him as an observer to sit there and watch. And sit there and, unless the coach speaks to him, in my opinion, that's when he should be heard from. And just have him as an ear. And then when the players leave and they have the game plan on the table, what I would say to Matt Patricia, what do you think of the game plan here? Should we do something? What do you think? And then tell me why this game plan's not good. What would you do against my game plan? And then the both of you could sit there and kind of play war games with one another, and you might be able to manipulate the game plan a little more. And so you get to bang this off him a little bit, and you get to go back and forth with it and massage the game plan a little better. And to me, that's an asset. That's the Eagles helping their coaching staff. That's the Eagles helping. You see, remember something. Brian Johnson has Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Sean Desai now has Matt Patricia. And Matt Patricia's going to be there. Dude, Matt Patricia's a better D coordinator than Vic Fangio. Whoever told you Vic Fangio was better than Matt Patricia? If you hired Matt Patricia as your D coordinator, I'd have been great with it. And if you would have told me, Sills, who would you rather have, Vic Fangio or Matt Patricia? Matt Patricia's got 3 Super Bowl rings. What's Vic Fangio ever done compared to that guy? We're not talking about head coaches. Sometimes that blinds people in a perception on how a guy is and who he is. Okay? You look at him. I'm not talking about him as a head guy. Because you know why I would never hire? Maybe Brian Flores. Maybe Brian Flores because he showed me, and maybe Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien and Brian Flores would probably be the only 2 coaches off the Belichick tree that he's had in that building that I would hire. Because the rest of those guys, Charlie Weisses of the world, the judges, they've all sucked. Every single coach that has come out of that building. Romeo Cornell was really a Parcells guy when he got the Kansas City job, so he wasn't really a Belichick guy. He was more of a Parcells guy. Okay? Okay? So, to me, I mean, Vic Fangio versus Matt Patricia, give me a break. So, Matt Patricia is important. And this is how the Eagles look at that relationship with Darius Slay. Get over it, kid. He's here. We need him. We want him. We want him to help with our D coordinator. Get this. Think about this. Matt Patricia is more valuable than Darius Slay because the things that Matt Patricia tells the D coordinator and the head coach are going to reflect whether or not this guy has a good season. Who do you think's more important? They're putting a structured defense together. Some say it's going to resemble what they did a year ago. What, do you think Darius Slay's putting the game plan together? Absolutely not. That was the rub with Doug Peterson. These coaches were hired by Howie. Howie hired Matt. What? You think Sirianni hired Matt Patricia? Seriously. Who would tell you some dumb shit like that? You think that Nick Sirianni reached out to Matt Patricia and offered him a job? Good night. Haven't you learned anything from the Doug Peterson situation? Haven't you learned anything? Okay? Some game plans matter with Patricia, but they don't when Gannon was in charge. Gannon had nobody. They learned a lesson. He had no checks and balances on that side of the ball, Gannon. There's now checks and balances. Gannon wasn't put in check by anybody. Who was his overseer? At the end of the year, they brought Fangio in to see what he was doing. And then come to find out, everything they suspected about the guy not being really focused on his job came true. Now you got a coordinator that's got kind of a watchdog there in so many ways to keep an eye on what they're doing on that side of the ball and report to the head coach and GM. This is what we're doing. Remember, he's a consultant to the organization. He's not a consultant to Sean Desai. He's a head coaching consultant, which means he reports to Nick, not Desai. That's not his job title. The reason he's not on the coaching staff is because he's connected with the front office. He don't answer to Desai. He answers to Nick, who answers to Howie. That's the Eagle way. That's the Eagle way. And by the way, you shouldn't be upset with that. It's winning. This is how the chain of command goes in that place. There's no doubt about it that's how that chain of command goes. Dude, there's not a chance in hell that Nick Sirianni has autonomy in that room to make hires. Big Seals, to be fair, was a 10-point lead, not 17. Okay. Sure. Technically, sure. Felt like 37. Didn't really matter if it was 57. You weren't winning. You weren't winning. You couldn't stop it. Didn't matter. Could have been 57 points. It wouldn't have mattered. Sure, 10. Congratulations. You had a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl, and you lost it. Okay? I guess. Oh, man. Hey, Philly, listen. But here, Philly, Philly 4-4. But underline this. Sills, everything you're kind of pointing out and what you're saying is so true, but we're winning. Absolutely. It's not an indictment. It's an observation. Nobody's indicting anything here. But when people try to think that Sirianni Sirianni plays the game. He's great at playing the game because Frank, as I told you a couple days ago, prepared him to play the game. Hey, you know how you build up equity in that building? You go along. And what happens is with the winning, they're going to put you in a position to win. They're going to make trades. They're going to make hires. All you do go out there and do is you go out there and you reflect the image that we want from the front office down into the locker room. See, that's where the rub was with Doug. Doug didn't want to give the culture from the upstairs into the locker room. He wanted his own culture. Most coaches do. Remember that old saying that, hey, get this. Remember that old saying, a team is a reflection of the head coach? Do you think this team is a reflection of the head coach or the way the organization is run? That football team doesn't stand on park benches screaming at fans, wearing quirky-ass T-shirts and shit. I get Kelsey and all that. But that team is run methodically like Howie. That team has the face of Howie Roseman on it, not Nick Sirianni. He's the boss. Okay? This is not. I'm not saying anything negative here. Okay, Arthur brings a point up. The team is a reflection of the quarterback, who in essence is a reflection of the organization. Hence why he got 255. He embodies it. He embodies everything that they believe in. There's a methodical way of doing business in Philly. It's why every coach has had a winning record since Andy Reid. There's a reason. I mean, you've been to how many Super Bowls now? Let's see. What? One, 2, 3. In the Laurie dynasty here, NFC dynasty, you are an NFC East dynasty. And it's the way you do business. The only head coach that had say really in the building was Andy. Because they were coming out of the whole Norman Brayman bullshit. And, you know, Ray Rhodes was a good coach, but not good enough. They were coming out of all that. I mean, seriously, after the whole Buddy thing, the team kind of floundered a little bit. It floundered. Ray kind of had some winning seasons, and then they got Andy in there. And then Andy turned it around because he came from the Holmgren tree, which was the Bill Walsh tree. Chip had full power. He did. He did. I said that he had a winning record. And that was probably your biggest failure organizationally in the last 23 years. He did have full power. It wasn't a complete disaster, though, that some of you think it was. He did have a winning record and won division titles, did he not? Make it sound like he didn't win. I think he had a couple double-digit win seasons, didn't he? It wasn't like Rich Kotite. Rich Kotite had double-digit wins, actually. Okay, 3 under Laurie. Okay. Kotite was a nightmare. He had 11 wins one year. Get it? He traded away. Well, I said that. JM, this is probably the worst. That was probably one of the worst general manager moves and personnel moves that they've made in the last 25 years was Chip Kelly. They hired a college guy. They hired an unprofessional guy who didn't know pro football. And Chip's doing a decent job right now with UCLA. Niners, Cowboys haven't won a ring in the 21st century. Yeah. And get this. To be candid and fair, Cincinnati has won more playoff games. The Bengals have won more playoff games in the last 20 years than the Cowboys have. They've won more playoff games in the last 2 years than the Cowboys have in 20. The Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals. Okay? All right. I got a list of Eagles that I think who could be Pro Bowlers. I think it's pretty substantial. And there's some new faces and names on this. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National.